Hey everybody, this is Perch. And if you've been on the internet at all in the last 3 to 4 years, one of the common things you'll hear is comics needs Jim Shooter. And when they say comics needs Jim Shooter, they're actually talking a lot less about Jim Shooter. The reality is, unfortunately, a lot of the people who are saying this don't really know too much about Jim Shooter, but they know one attribute of his personality that is true, that is that they believe would be valuable in comics. They're not wrong, by the way. I always kind of grimace a little bit when I hear that because I think Jim Shooter is a pretty fascinating guy. And I mean, here's a guy who was basically writing for DC before he could drive. And I think that he just, as you've heard Joe and I say many times, a lot of his contributions get missed over this one attribute of him, which, while interesting, to me is not even the most interesting thing about him. And that attribute is he's a hard ass. He basically kept people on task. In a tech company, they might call him a hardline project manager. He's somebody who would drive dates. He's somebody who would make sure that the trains ran on time. That is not the analogy you want to use anymore. Apparently, that indicates that your background calling somebody a Nazi. That's not. It's just being on time, jackasses. It's not all about being a Nazi. Anyway, and Jim Shooter was good at that. Make no mistake about it. He ran it like a business. Arguably, his flaw, if you want to call it that, is that his political acumen, his ability to influence, dropped over time because of his position. And you can say, if you will, that people just need to suck it up or leave. I get it, but there's also some pragmatism to managing a team, particularly if that team doesn't particularly want to be managed. And that's how a lot of creative things are. Anyway, this question goes into it, so let's talk about it. And the question goes, hey, Perch, one of the interesting things in comics I've heard is how hardball the editors and managers used to play, especially, yes, Jim Shooter, setting high standards for books and creators. I'm generally of the belief that competition drives creativity, but these days, the attitude of the creators and the companies feels less like a competitive for-profit industry and more like some kind of commune jobs program, where people are free to spend time attacking fans and ranting about nonsense only to turn in mediocre to subpar work. How do we get here, and should those companies start hiring more hard asses? Well, what's interesting in all this is that while a lot of attention goes into kind of what did you say, the attacking fans and ranting about nonsense. It's annoying, but to me, the real sin, the problem, is that there's a lot of books that at times feel unimaginative. You get editors missing obvious things, spelling errors on the front cover, just big quality control issues. And so it's funny because if the work was really amazing, I mean, here's my premise. I'll put it to you this way. If the comics being put out right now there weren't mistakes being made, the quality was good, the storylines were doing great, the sales were 500,000 copies or more, it just like distribution was solved, marketing had their shit together. I mean, just like it was on time. You didn't see these weird delayed events or comics that were coming out at random times. If things were buttoned up, but the creators were on social media still acting like nutcases from time to time, would you care? So some of you would care, I'm sure, but my guess is the majority of people would not. They would stick to what's good. And why is that? Because there are movies and there are projects and there's music and there are other things where the people involved in them are lunatics, but the quality is so good that you're like, yeah, that I'm still going to see that movie. I'm still listening to that music. I'm still, I'm still going to do it. There are music artists who are complete jackasses on social media, but people like what they do, and so they get a pass. They get a pass because of the quality. Now, again, I'm sure there will be some of you who will say I wouldn't. I'd still be upset. And we kind of live in a world of this is the weird part of quote cancel culture, where it's sport to find people who are acting up and then go at them. Absolutely, that is absolutely true. That is that's at some point going to surpass quality because the entertainment factor of this whole thing is just too strong. But generally speaking, if the work in comics was really, really, really good, the sales were high, and things were going great, actually great, not fiction great, but actually great, then I don't think anybody would care about this other stuff. I don't think that you would hear this social media constant barrage from some, but I mean nobody would care. Like it's like, hey, if if it was the '90s, well, I mean, for that matter, look, Rob Liefeld didn't have the most amazing, stellar reputation with people back in the '90s. People still bought their books. Now, granted, it was harder to find out what he was on about, but a lot of these creators were not the great. I mean, John Byrne was a legendary dick, and people still, bought the quality of the work was good. So, people didn't think that much about it. So my argument is if the quality is good, you'll forgive a lot of sins. However, if it was the other way around, and the work is ass, right? Like the quality of the books are worse than today. Spelling errors on constantly throughout covers, just pages missing in books, just stories that went nowhere, constant, endless images of the X-Men having dinner, just nothing was like comics for nobody, done poorly, illustrated bad, just the dregs of comics. But all the creators were awesome on social media. They were friendly. They didn't attack anyone. They were just like, somebody came at them. They're like, hey man, whatever. Sorry you didn't like this book. I'll try harder next time. Just the cheerfulest people. Nobody wants that world. I mean, you want the cheerfulness, sure, but I mean, you will. Nobody would go, well, these comics are absolute garbage, but at least the creators are good on social media, so I'll buy them. Like you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't. You'd not buy them. You would cheerfully say that's a really good bloke, and you would not spend your money. That's what would happen. So I mean, the world we should be able to live in is that perfect world where people aren't nutcases and the quality is good. But I digress. Um, I guess to the question, um, you know, yes, I think the comic publishers would benefit from some hard asses. The places where I would start is not the creative talent, but the editors, and in particular, the editor in chief and the management of the of these publishers. I definitely think you need some people who are more hardline, hard asses in those roles. Absolutely. I think that what you see today is a combination of a lot of things. I think it's self-described and invested in as a cottage industry. That's where it's at right now. The comic industry thinks of itself as small, and it behaves small. The pay is small, and so you don't have people who are like, I'm going to go to the mat every single day, in my full-time job. I'm not talking about the creators, because there are creators out there who definitely they're not in it to get rich, or that maybe they are in it to get rich, but they're not getting rich, but it's a passion project for them. I know people have made fun of this concept, but there are plenty of creators out there who are in it for the passion. Absolutely. And the fact they're not making money, I mean, they wish they made more money, but they're in it because they love comics. For the office jobs people, though, for the editors and everything else, I don't think that's enough. Granted, you should be passionate about your job. Hope you are. I think that's important, but passion can't be the sole attribute. You're going to have to be good at what you do. You are going to have to meet deadlines. You're going to have to be, you're going to have to be on it. And I think there's a decent amount of people who are not. Sorry, I think, and for a variety of reasons. There's just they're not paid well enough. They're not, it could be lots of different reasons that they just they're not invested. And that is, at the top. It's funny. I'm recording this video, and literally as I'm recording it, a text message comes in from someone you all would recognize that says leadership should be replaced. It's like, yeah, exactly. It needs to be 100%, and it needs to be replaced by somebody more hard-assed. It does. Somebody who is able to meet schedules, meet deadlines, get shit done. That is what that job entails. That is what that job needs. Is Jim Shooter the guy? Jim Shooter. I mean, hell, why not? I mean, normally I would say look, it's time to bring in some fresh blood, somebody new to comics, somebody who could drive some results. And one of the problems comics has is it frequently goes back to the well for the same people over and over and over again. People have washed out. Well, I'll make an exception in this case. Yeah, I mean, screw it. Bring back Jim Shooter. I mean, why not? I don't think that's a cure-all to everything. And so I think when you say, leadership should be replaced, it's like, yeah, like all of it, not a little bit of it, not one person. I think if you put Jim Shooter into DC right now and you kept everyone else intact, I mean, that'd be hilarious. I think you'd get to watch Shooter's head explode in real time. But I mean, same thing with Marvel. You put Shooter back in at Marvel and you got some of the same individuals there. Just watch. It would be funny. Set some cameras up, make that a reality show, but it would not. I mean that wouldn't be very nice to Shooter. You gotta do some real wholesale replacement management, and it's not because people are too woke. It's not because they're angry on social media. It's because fundamentally they're not good at their job. They can't meet deadlines. They can't get back to people in a reasonable time frame. They can't run a shop like a professional shop, and that's what needs to be done. The comment you make in here. Yeah, it does feel like a commune. One of the reasons it feels like a commune is because, there's not enough money in it. Bluntly, there's just not enough cash in this to make it worth people. That's the problem. It screwy. If there was more cash in it, I do believe people would be better. But as long as we're paying commune rates, we're getting commune people. That's the screwy bit. But anyway, I so I hope that somebody strong like that can come in. It definitely is needed. The weird part is, if you're thinking strategically as an owner, right now, putting some new management in place that would go hard-assed on some of this stuff and really start to execute in a sharp, crisp way, you would crush everyone else around you. I mean, if you're small, if you're one of the indies, obviously it's going to be almost impossible for you to gain momentum. You can do it, and you still should try, but you have so much ground to cover that if you were seen being very, very successful, you just get gobbled up, snatched, acquired, everything else. But if you're Marvel, DC, or Image, and you really want to bury the other two, put a hard ass in charge with some other hard ass members of leadership. Let the creative, go nuts, do good stuff, but run it like a tight business. And in 2 years, you would kill the other two. That's what I would do. Anyway, thank you for the question. Good question, and here's hoping for some of that in the future. Thanks for listening.